Hello, my name's Geoff Kersey, and in this programme I'm going to give you lots of hints and tips to help you with your paintings of trees, woodlands and forests. In this one we're looking at a willow tree in late autumn, and it has a little bit of foliage on it but not too much. But first of all we need to look at the particular way the branches come out from the trunk on a willow tree. So I've painted a bit of colour into the background because it's at the front of a mass of trees in a park. And I'm starting with a number 6 brush and a strong mixture of burnt sienna and ultramarine blue. And I'm going to start by painting the trunk. And I'm going to get quite a few twists and bends into it. Get some branches coming off almost at a right angle and then dipping downwards. This brush has a good point to it but not quite good enough, so I'll go so far with it, but then I'll have to swap to a finer brush to get the fine tracery of branches. Okay, put a bit more colour in. Let's continue that effect where the branch comes out almost at 90 degrees and then the weight of it makes it dip down. Let's put another one in there and something else off to the left hand side. I'm then going to convert to a detailer brush, a number 2, get a bit more of the dark paint, the burnt sienna and ultramarine blue, and just take some of these branches a bit further with some really fine strokes, just using the very tip of the brush. It is quite busy, so I can afford to put quite a lot of branch work into it. Get a few branches cutting across the trunk. Maybe get them going a little bit further out as well. Now, because we've got that dark background in, some of the branches catch the light and actually appear lighter than the background. So for that I'm going to take some opaque paint. This is Naples yellow, quite a thick colour, but it has a hint of white in it, so it's opaque. And I'm adding to it a little bit of raw sienna. And still with the detailer brush, the number 2, I'm going to put a few fine branches in as well, coming out of here. And the darker the background, the more the fine branches stand out, the more effect they have. Maybe a little bit of light on the trunk itself, like that. And then I'm going to take a little touch of raw sienna. And then soften that into the rest of the trunk with some more dark brown, like that. So it just picks out a little bit of light on the trunk. And then maybe 1 or 2 more branches with that strong mixture of Naples yellow and raw sienna. You don't want too much raw sienna in it because it's the opaque quality of the Naples yellow that you want to take advantage of. Taking it right up into there. And when that's had a bit of time to dry, we'll look at putting some suggestions of foliage onto it. Well, now that that's dry, I've got a mixture of lemon yellow and Naples yellow. Both opaque colours, they work well together. The Naples yellow just calms down the lemon yellow slightly, takes a bit of the acid out of it. And I've got this number 8 brush, which I'm going to use on its side. I'm just sort of skidding across the rough surface. See how I'm using the texture of the rough paper? Give those hints of a little bit of foliage. I'm going to put a bit more lemon in. It's a good idea to vary the colour. So this is a bit more acid because it's a bit more lemon. And generally the brush strokes follow that dip, that slope downhill. I'm going to use the point of the brush on some of them to make them a bit more definite, like that. And for some I'll add a bit more Naples yellow in order to vary the tone and colour. That's quite like that. And don't worry about putting some of these across the trunk because of course they would obscure the trunk partially. A bit more lemon, a bit more of that strong lemon yellow. Really here you are taking advantage of the opaque quality of the paint. I'm going to now take a thinner brush, the detailer, and just enhance this with a few finer marks with just this opaque lemon yellow. And this is neat paint. This is straight out of the tubes, quite thick, because obviously the thicker it is, the more opaque it is. And we'll just pick out 1 or 2 highlights with that lemon. All the time following that drop, that slope. And now that I've done that, there's just one more finishing touch. I'm just making sure that I've really cleaned this detailer brush and got a bit more of that dark mixture of burnt sienna and ultramarine blue. And there's one or two areas where I think we could just get a bit more of a glimpse of trunk and branches just by strengthening them a little bit in parts, so that between the glimpses of foliage you do see a bit more evidence of the branches. Let's get some going that way as well. Well, I think that completes that, because it's important with anything like this that you do know when to stop and you don't overwork it. And here you can see this effect in the context of the finished picture. In this one, I'm going to show you how you can create a feeling of recession in a woodland or forest area by making the more distant trees really appear further away. This is a winter scene, so I've started by putting some colours onto the background that give us that feeling of a late winter afternoon with a glow in the sky. Now that that's dried, I'm going to start by making a thin grey colour by mixing the cobalt blue and crimson alizarin together, then adding a touch of burnt sienna to slightly grey it. So it's a soft grey that tones in with the sky, because basically it's made of the same elements of the sky. And because the furthest away trees should have the thinnest trunks and branches, I'm starting with a liner writer brush. And we'll start by putting a tall tree in for the background here in this light grey colour. Working my way up. Pressing on a bit more with the liner writer brush at first, but easing the pressure off as I get further away from the base of the tree to give that impression of really fine, delicate branch work. And you can see this is quite pale, quite cool in tone, to give that feeling of distance. Now looking at that, I think I could make a tree even further away in the mist, almost just a distant glimpse of a tree. So I've taken the same grey mixture again. This time I've added a bit more water to just make it a little bit thinner. And let's look at a tree, maybe even further back still. See, that already looks that bit further away, just because it's a thinner, paler colour. Still quite busy though. I can still do plenty of branch work. Getting the twigs and branches really fine. Okay, now if I want to get one to the left of those, which is a little bit stronger still, just that little bit stronger, I'm going to put some more cobalt blue and crimson alizarin in, and a bit more burnt sienna. So I've got still roughly the same colour, but a richer version of it. And let's put a tree now, a little bit. I'm still using the liner writer brush, but I'm pressing on a bit more to get a broader line. Let's get a tree going right up. Take this right out of the top. It's important that you allow your trees to overlap, so that you feel as though you're glimpsing the more distant ones through the gaps in the branches of the nearer ones. So allow the branches to cut across, going both to the left and the right. You can see how that's a stronger tone altogether, so it's pushing those others that bit further back into the picture. It's important to put branches low down on the trunk as well, because it can look a bit lollipop shape if you neglect that and just put the branches at the top. Okay, a bit more work into these top ones there. And now I'm going to swap for a slightly bigger brush. I'm going to a number 6 brush. And I'm going to take now a mixture of cobalt blue and burnt sienna, going away from the grey and getting a bit more to a brown, a little bit richer, a little bit stronger. And let's do one now that's stronger still. So just by changing to the wider brush, it makes it much easier for me to do a wider trunk. It's got a good point, the brush, so I can still get fairly fine branches. allowing them to cut across again. Still working with this brush, but I think now I need to go back to the liner writer, because even though this tree is nearer to us and the trunk and branches are wider, as they get towards the tip they're still nice and fine. I find the best way to do convincing looking branches is quickly. Very slow, deliberate strokes, never quite as spontaneous as a fast stroke of the brush. And then I'm going to get a different mixture of paint. I'm going back to that number 6 brush. This time I'm taking burnt sienna with ultramarine blue to give me a really rich dark tone. Still plenty of burnt sienna though in it, so that as well as a dark tone, I get that little bit of warmth from the red in the burnt sienna. I think a bit redder. I think I'm going to put a bit more burnt sienna into that to get that real warmth out of it. And this one is quite a bit wider, quite a bit nearer to us. Again, I can go so far with the branches, but it would be wise to not to try and finish them off with this brush, but to go back to the liner writer. Let's do a few more larger branches just cutting right across, and then I'll go back to the liner writer brush, pick up a bit more of this rich dark brown, and more or less carry on where I left off, just so that I still get that fine branch work. But you also need to remember that in a densely wooded area, in the gaps between the foreground trees, you would get a little glimpse of more distant ones. Okay, so that's finished. And here you can see this effect in the context of the finished picture.